part of building a family culture is doing life together. And what works for one family is different for another family. So if you have your children in the public school system, I can understand why you're doing the laundry because their schedules are so jam-packed, especially if they have extracurricular activities. But when you're at home, you're able to delegate and teach. So I'm like, hey, we're a part of a team. We all live here. We all make the mess. And so in our household, everybody has something to do with the laundry.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. This episode of Homeschool Talks features a conversation originally hosted live on our Facebook page. So if you like what you hear, be sure to follow us there for more content like this. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoy the program.
Welcome, everyone. Hi. Okay, well, I'm Sandra Kim. I'm the Media Relations Director for Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Joining me today is Kelly Edwards, homeschool coach with 90 Minute School Day and homeschool mom to 3 of her own kids. Thanks for joining me today, Kelly. It was a pleasure to meet you. It was a pleasure to meet you recently in West Virginia, and I'm so excited to get to talk to you today about homeschooling can give time back together to families. I know that your tips will help and inspire us. I see our Facebook friends are joining us now. Hello and welcome to everyone. Please do let us know where you're from and where you are in your homeschooling journey in the comments, whether you're just thinking about homeschooling or just need an attagirl, mom, dad, grandma, caretaker, you got this. I tell that to myself. Kelly, I'm sure, tells that to herself. And we're here today to encourage you. So you've got this. And my family just actually started homeschooling just 2 years ago. I have a 14-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And Kelly, as we get started, will you tell me a little bit more about yourself? What brought you to homeschooling?
Well, thank you, Sandra, for having me. And we started homeschooling 8 years ago, which it's gone a lot faster lately than it did at the beginning. So we started homeschooling. I never thought I would be a homeschool mom. I'm kind of like that accidental homeschooler that I think resonates with a lot of people. My oldest daughter was in first grade. And what kind of is interesting about my family is our children have all come to us through the foster adoption program. We live here in West Virginia. And so at the time, my daughter was in kindergarten and first grade living with us. She was our foster child. And we knew we were going to adoption with her. And that's when we started to look for alternatives for her specifically, just because she wasn't being served in the public school system. She had a lot of social emotional situations. Academically, she was fine. And so I started digging into homeschooling, and she's also neurodivergent. And that's something that maybe not a lot of people understand is like neurodivergence is learning differently. And so like ADHD, autism, we're more familiar with that. But trauma is also a neurodivergence, PTSD, anxiety. And so she needed a little extra support. And so we brought her home for those reasons. And which is kind of funny because we brought her home to do something different than school. And then I kind of recreated school at home for my daughter. So we've come a long way since then. But that's kind of originally where we brought her home for attachment number one. And because we could fulfill some of her neurodivergent needs better in our home environment.
Wow, that is really just heartwarming and just really near and dear to my heart because my sister just started on her foster care journey, and she has a little one with her right now. So warms my heart. And I just am so excited to be talking to you about all the different tips and things that we can talk about. So you have talked about the importance of the gift of time. Could you share a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I'm super passionate about advocating for homeschoolers, homeschool moms, homeschool kids, people who are thinking about homeschooling, people who are just curious. And the reason is we can give ourselves the gift of time. My business is called the 90 Minute School Day because my kids and I learn every day, all day long. So do your kids, so do kids in the public school system. And so it's really about cooperating with one another, learning to collaborate, learning to kind of follow interests to get curious and to do that in the spirit of connection. And so when you have connection and relationship at the bottom of your homeschool, like that's your foundation, then the sky's sort of the limit. And that's what homeschooling provides. Whereas there is connection and relationship in a public school setting or a private school setting, but it's like one adult and 30 kids. So that's a little bit of a different dynamic. And giving time is what we never can really give ourselves, is the gift of time. It's limited. We're only here so long. We only have our children so long. That old saying about like the years are short, but the days are long. You know the one I'm talking about?
I totally do.
Especially in like the little years when, you know, you've got all the diapers, you've got the nursing, you've got the tantrums, all of those things. So homeschooling is giving yourselves this space, because one of the most difficult things is transition times with kids and with adults. Like I have trouble with transitions myself. So there's so many things you can do when you're at home with your children, because you have the agency and you have the decision-making power, and you're not subject to some outside institution.
Yes. I mean, I think sometimes the choices that you have can be paralyzing, at least for me, because I'm like, oh, wow, I have a chance. I can do biology. I can do anatomy. I can do flying creatures. And then I'm like, there are so many choices, you know, but I mean, too many, but which is so nice. But I guess one thing I could say for sure is that, you know, if our day gets away and, you know, we're watching, there was a little butterfly that landed in our back deck, and it was like just not ready to go anywhere. And so we're like,
you had a gift of time. You could sit there.
We did. And so we sat there, and then we made some like simple syrup, and then we watched like the little, I don't know what it's called, the little thing unfurl.
The proboscis.
Yes, and they go.
I know this because I got it in homeschooling. No.
Oh, good job. I have not gotten to that. It was not in our unit. We just went out on the back deck and we went off, you know, but I mean, that's one of the things when you say you have agency, that was our afternoon. We observed the monarch butterfly eating and, you know, did a little sketch, and it turned into like a whole like moment in time, but you're not allowed to have that level of flexibility. So for me, I would say one of the gifts for our family is that flexibility.
Yes. Flexibility and that freedom to go down the rabbit holes. And like the reason you don't know about the proboscis is because no one asked, right? But as soon as someone would have said, what is that called? You would have been learning together. And that's the beauty of it, is like because you're there with your children, and you can say, you know what, that history lesson I was planning on today, we're going to push pause on that. We can pick that up later, and we're going to take this natural science moment and develop those core memories that we can have. As you know, that's what your children are going to remember. They're not going to remember whatever was going on in history that day. They're going to remember this because there's relationship.
Right. And, you know, it is those core memories. Sometimes I get a little bit of anxiety because I'm like, we didn't check the box, but I have to remember that this is a journey, and you don't go on a journey thinking I need to check this box and check that box. It evolves over time. So
yeah, and that's part of kind of like the homeschooler developmental stages as the parents, right? We kind of start and we're excited, but we just don't know where to turn. And there's so much information because the internet is amazing for information, but then there's that overwhelm that really having a relationship with other homeschoolers, being able to tap into all the resources HSLDA provides, those really kind of help guide us. And so we need that community as well of fellow homeschoolers, those who have gone before us that can be like, yeah, you don't need that. You don't need that one. You know, like this is something you need to dig into.
Right. So you can let all the chaff fall away and just go straight to the grain, which is
and it's reminding yourself of why am I doing this? Why have I made this like countercultural decision? And everybody has a different reason, but it's like that reason that brought you to homeschooling, you can circle back to and write it down. You know, it's like, why am I doing this? I am doing this for me. It was for attachment, number one. I have like about 100 reasons probably, but that's the number one. And so whenever I'm having a hard day, I circle back to like, wait, why am I doing this? I'm doing this to develop a relationship with my daughter, to make sure that we have that really concentrated time together, that we are building a strong foundation of relationship first. And then I'm going to trust that all that other stuff is going to siphon in after that. So if I'm fighting with her over, because I've done this all the wrong way. Like if I'm fighting with her over like, this writing assignment needs to get done by dinner time. We've broken relationship. You actually can't learn when you're kind of like, when you've descended out of your like prefrontal cortex and you're descended down into your emotional brain or maybe even your amygdala. Learning stops. So you can punch out facts just because you're like, I have to do this or I can't go into the next section.
Right.
But you're not learning. And so you have to have that kind of that relaxed state. But I'm kind of getting off topic, so I apologize. But
okay, no. That's awesome. And that
I'll do
really
that.
dovetails perfectly with homeschooling. So, I mean, I came out of public school. Can you tell us a little bit what life used to look like in the hustle and bustle of school, or did you go ahead and start right into homeschooling? So maybe I can talk about, how our lives have gone from public school and that time schedule to what it looks like now.
Yes. And that's a great question because I think most adults, especially us who are looking to homeschool, even if we were homeschooled ourselves, it looks different now. Homeschooling is much different than it did kind of in the pioneering homeschool eras of like the 90s and early 2000s. But like for me, myself, I was public school educated, private school educated. My daughter went through kindergarten and first grade, and then she actually went back to fifth grade, my oldest. And then my younger two have been homeschooled. But my middle daughter, who's 8 now, she did go to a Montessori school for preschool. So we have kind of like an eclectic mix where I've been the parent and then I have my background. And what happens when you're in like whether you're going to private school or public school, or you're going away to school, you've got that time constraint of start time. And so you wake up in the morning and you're all running around. We got to, where's so-and-so's shoes? And I put your backpack over there. Would you move it? And we're getting ourselves our lunches, our clothes. We're getting out the door. We're trying to catch the bus maybe, or we're driving to school so we're not late. Then they're in school all day. And then we're in the line to pick them up, or we're at the bus stop. We bring them home. They may or may not have homework. We get the snack. We do the extracurricular activity. We drop them off there. We pick them up, or we go. We eat dinner, maybe together, maybe not, because we've got too much going on. And then maybe there's free time in the day, maybe not. It's bedtime, rinse and repeat, and we're recovering on the weekends. And so that was my experience when we were doing kindergarten and first grade. She still needed to nap. She has a high sleep need. And so that was part of like, besides attachment, like get us out of this rat race. We can't have this connection that we're looking for because we just don't have the time because we've subscribed to these different systems.
Agreed. And, it's not the system that you have made. So, I mean, my kids aren't super late risers. Their natural clock wakes them up around 7 a.m. But that did not work with, the public school schedule. So I would wake them up at 6 a.m. and there was like screaming and yelling from 6 to 7 because I was like very concentrated on them having something to eat before they got on the bus. Mm-hmm. And then, they needed to take that 10-minute walk to the bus stop, which came at 7:17.
Or the run?
The run. And then we would miss it. So then I would have to drive them to the next bus stop or to school. Yes. So I totally understand and agree that level of, it was really, really high stress. Cortisol levels are rising, they're screaming. And I mean, to show you the opposite of what that looks like now, the kids sort of wake up on their own. I do require them to get dressed and brush their teeth and make their bed, that we do have a morning routine. And then they come downstairs, and then I do have one kid that does like to cook. So she's like, oh, who wants an omelet? Like, who wants, eggs are easy. It's just like this very sort of like slower start. And then, we turn on the podcast, science podcast of the day. Let's start with that. It's a much different start. And I don't miss the other one for sure.
Yes. Same here. It's easier for me. And especially if your child is neurodivergent. Like if you've got a child with ADHD, autism, you've got a child with dyslexia, you've got a child with trauma or anxiety, then whatever the neurotypical child experiences and parent getting out the door, then it's that much more exacerbated. Or if that's you as the parent, it's certainly, it's almost like a system to fail at, right? And then you failed and you yelled at your kid and it's not even 9 a.m. and then you sent them off to school. No one wants to be feeling that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess now, when we talk about dynamics and how the kids are interacting with each other, at home, how is that For us, it's very different just because normally our kids would all be in different schools at this point, but they're all under the same roof, and we're doing things together. So there's a lot more shared experiences, shared memories. We're reading the same books, or we're doing read aloud, so that there's that shared moment as well. Do you have some sort of experiences like that for you with your kids as well?
Yes. In fact, for us, we have a natural rhythm to our days, but right now we have family in town, so we're just like still on summer vacation. But what has developed that's been a really sweet result that I don't know that I kind of like thought too much about, because our number one thing was our relationship as a parent with the child. But the really sweet sauce has been the development of relationship between my children as siblings. And then also the deepening of friendships that they have with the other homeschoolers that we've built community with. So at different times of the year, it looks a little different, but we systematically meet with homeschoolers out in nature once a week, sometimes twice. And so they've developed these really rich friendships, and they are outside of their age range, because it's just like how society has kind of always operated. You don't have to have like a peer aged person to be friends with. Like, I don't know, you and I could compare notes right now, but we were probably not exactly the same grade level. And, we're friends. And so this is normal. And so my 8-year-old has really good friends that are 12. And she also would say that like some of the adults are her friends, and then some of the younger children. So that mixed age connection is something you can offer, which everyone's really concerned about socialization all the time when they start homeschooling. But actually, the amount of socialization you get that's healthy is just kind of the sky's the limit for your homeschooling and how you can kind of build that. So I would say sibling relationships are really tight in my family. I'm not sure that they would necessarily have that time together to work through. Believe me, we have plenty of like situations where we have to work through our social emotional skill set and our toolbox and maybe pick up some new ones. Like, we don't speak to each other like that. We don't grab before asking. But it's these opportunities that we're able to curate and resolve in a way that align with our family values, and not some adult that I've kind of I've given that authority to just by proxy and enrolling them in a public school system or private.
Agreed. Yeah. So I love the fact that I have a little bit more time to speak into our family culture. And, we do things. One of the things that I do with my kids is that they started tennis pretty early. So, when we have time in the week or early in the morning, I'll play doubles with them, or they'll play single. Somebody will be the ball girl. And it's something really, really special, because I know that in a more normal situation, or if they were going to school, that we would never have time like that, on a Wednesday morning. So just treasuring those times. And then, when the kids are going off, I'm like, I need you guys to go ride your bike 30 minutes away. And then I don't care what happens, but just giving them that sort of freedom to like roam and just be, I think is really a priceless treat.
And it gives them opportunities to develop responsibility, right? Because like I do something very, well, not similar, but similar. I walk with a walking partner every day. And so my kids are on the playground and we're walking around the playground, but this is time where they are growing in responsibility because they are the ones at the playground. And I've got different ages and they're playing there. But they also kind of get to grow in their own autonomy. Like they're responsible because I'm a little bit farther away, and they get to kind of grow in that area and have that time together every morning that's consistent. And so, yeah, it's just, there's so many little things like that. And I think people like hearing the stories. So I loved hearing yours about how you invited them to play. And then I kind of have this regular walk time and they have this regular, we call it morning movement. And that's helpful.
That is awesome. And, you know, I guess, you know, I keep trying, for me as a new homeschooler, keep trying to find the right and perfect way. And what I've finally realized, I'm a little slow on the uptick, but what I finally realized is that there is no right way. There is your way, there is your family culture way, and there's a way that you feel comfortable with, and it may or may not be at the same time or pace as others. And so the whole, like, not, you know, putting my kids against your kids, like, oh no, they already finished that, or they know what a proboscis is and we don't, you know, it's like, it's, you know, there's so many different things, and just going about homeschooling at your own pace is really where I have been able to find rest, peace, joy, you know, and let go of the fact that we are all moving at our own pace. and that is okay. So
Right.
I guess that's one thing today is a big one.
Yeah, it's all about trusting ourselves, and that we are comprised of our family unit for a reason, and that these kids can explore at their own pace. And it's okay if Bobby Jr. down the street is reading at an 8th grade level and he's 8, and my 9-year-old is still at a 2nd grade level. It's okay, because I think you and I probably read at the same level. It's kind of like comparing potty training notes. Sometimes that's more helpful to kind of look at a stage that we've successfully kind of emancipated ourselves from. And it's like, hey, you know what? Sometimes you have the early potty trainers and sometimes you have the late ones. And it's not really about us so much as like, they're on their own time schedule, and we can choose to make it really complicated and give a lot of extra effort on our part. And that might actually break relationship. And so sometimes it's better to just honor the child, look at what's really kind of take a step back, and less is always more. That's like my favorite saying ever, is less is more. It's like note to self.
Ah, that's a good one. I might have to jot that one down. Less is more. And also, knowing like my son's eyes have glazed over. We are no longer interested in carryover anymore, and just knowing we are done. We are done for right now. And so just not having to sit there through the rest of what the whole class is doing, and that we are moving at the pace of my child is, again, to me, a huge gift that they can move at that time.
Yeah.
So I know we've talked about some things that the family does together. I talked about, we do family tennis. We do family hikes. This one is one that my husband is not into, but for some reason I really like it when he does it with us, which is family grocery shopping. I don't know why he doesn't like it. I think it's fun. But what are some fun things that your family does together?
Okay, we do not family grocery shop. I love that for you. And I'm kind of curious. I'm like, I would like to talk offline about this family grocery shopping and why you enjoy it so much.
I like grocery
yes.
store.
I do think it's really fun to hear how different families and what they're doing. So like for us, one of the things that I enjoyed hiking myself, and I don't know that my husband didn't like it. I just don't think he did a lot of it. And so we enjoy hiking out in nature, and he's very into the stars. So he really likes looking at stars at night. And our oldest has gotten kind of interested in that with him. But then because of homeschooling, she has really kind of grown this huge love of birding. And and one of the nice things about homeschooling that I don't think a lot of people talk about is like, it becomes kind of a family interest, even if it's only one person. So she's the birder. She reads the magazines. She buys the books. She's like reading all the time. But because she's so interested in it, we kind of get informed by proxy. And my own knowledge of the local birds that live around us has really grown. And because we're home more and we're outside and we hike as a family, or we bike ride as a family, or we just go to the park, or we might just like stop on the side of a road and go down a trail. We've done that before. We'll see these birds, and then we've gotten to start recognizing them with her. And then she gets a chance to inform us and teach us about that. So sometimes, I'm learning things, but it's about inviting the family to participate and then honor someone's interest.
I love that. Well, I have zero interest in NBA basketball, but now I know more about it than I've ever wanted to know. My son wants to talk about it. He wants to talk about who got drafted to where and what their family story is. And his brother also plays and the father also coaches. And I'm like, can we talk about something else? But it has become a family thing, because then we'll quiz him. Hey, do you know like who got drafted in 1980? And he'll know the answer.
Yeah.
So now we play family basketball. He likes to show us his trick moves. I like to show him that I can still actually make three-point shots. He's pretty impressed by his mom from time to time. And I know who Giannis Antetokounmpo is. And just, Rise is a great movie on Disney Plus.
I have three girls. I'm like, I'm learning a lot here.
So it's a neat story about these brothers who lived in Greece, and then they had an opportunity to play for the NBA. Just a really neat story, but just showing their dedication and grit. But anyways, again, I totally agree with you. I just don't think that if we weren't all under one roof for so many hours, I would know all about all these things. But, you
would know he likes this. You would know some of it, but you wouldn't have had all of that time to really be there to be shared with.
Right.
we get to be shared with our children all day long. And if you have a kids like mine, they're like a stream of consciousness. Sometimes I'm tuned in, and other times I'm like, what was that? I'm sorry. My ears are tired.
Okay. I mean, for me, one of the sweet things is, I do work, and so I'm working from home, and, he'll come by and give me a sweet little kiss and move on his little way. Unless he has to do his journal, then he avoids me like the plague, because he's like, I've got to do something. I haven't done it. And so, but yeah, definitely. I think I totally agree with you. It's not birding for us. Apparently it's the NBA. But hopefully there'll be something that I'm maybe more interested in.
Yes. Well, and that's something else that I think is kind of fun to talk about is like homeschooling. We want to follow our children's interests and we want to support them in their interests, but it's also like Charlotte Mason talked about this a lot. That's one kind of philosophy of homeschooling. And she talks a lot about mother culture, which is to continue our own learning. So our children, we're modeling, but it's also just for us. It's like that self-care practice where we find something that we're interested in. Like I've kind of rediscovered watercoloring as an adult by homeschooling my children. Because then I heard somewhere along the line about nature journaling. And then I just picked it up for myself. But my children join me. They kind of see me watercoloring. And sometimes I just want to be by myself. And then it turns into like this beautiful, we're all watercoloring. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, this is more of a gift. Like I'm watching them flourish and we're just relaxing together and they want to be with me. And I can facilitate that in a way that also fills me up. I don't know if that made sense, but.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So, I was like not having the best time. I don't know, there was sometime last year where I was like, everything just seemed like a chore. Everything was really, really hard. And a friend of mine was like, why don't you teach what you love and what you're interested in? I'm like, that's not what people are doing in the 2nd and 4th grade, And she was like, what are people doing in the 2nd and 4th grade? Whatever you want, Sandra. And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And so I did a poem a month. So they would memorize because the brains are like so.
Yes, it's incredible.
Yeah. And so I would give them a poem and then I would say, okay, so we have a month to learn this poem and then we'll talk about it and all this stuff and process. And they would look at the poem and they'd be like, there is no way. This is way too long. And then like in 3 days, they'd be like, can I recite it for you?
Yeah. Isn't it incredible?
Yeah. And so once they know it, then we would discuss it. It's much easier, to do that. And so I had a moment this summer. We're at the beach. The girls were, they had played. And so they were just resting in the sand. So their heads were together. And then they went line by line, Wordsworth, The Daffodils. Not because I told them to, but because they were sort of quizzing each other. Like, hey, who remembered that poem from back in May? And I was like, oh my goodness, it's sticking,
Yes, and they're playing around with it. Like it kind of turns into this riff. Children love poetry for that reason. Is there's this lyrical quality, there's a rhythm to it, there's rhyme, and then there's so many good adjectives. And so it's just really like developing a love of poetry. Like I personally hated poetry because it was always like, now the English lesson today is we're writing haikus, and so just bam out the haiku. Check the box and, move on. And it wasn't presented in kind of like an interesting way or an applicable way. Because you really, to make learning your own, you have to be able to apply it. And so we want to fill up. That's one thing homeschooling does, is because they have so much time to explore their own interests outside of homeschooling that they're building up these reservoirs of knowledge and context and they're applying what they have learned. Like that's such a beautiful example of your daughters just like playing a game with each other based off of this poem and it's relational.
I didn't tell them to do it, and I didn't tell them. It wasn't like recite daffodils now. I was just sitting under the umbrella, and then all of a sudden they were doing it, and I was like, it worked. But poetry was no part of our curriculum per se, but it was, like you said, it's the mother culture, and it was just something that's near and dear to my heart. And whether or not they understand, this 10th grade level poem, because they're 8 or 10, it doesn't matter. It's, it'll eventually build into each other or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important, just like I was talking about my daughter and birding, and you were talking about your son in basketball, and now they know something about their mom. that maybe they wouldn't have ever known. My mom likes poetry. She specifically really enjoys this one. And I can share that with her. And then that also teaches our children the socio-emotional intelligence is so huge right now. There's all these curriculums to like help support that in the public school systems. And it is important. We want that, but it comes naturally when you're surrounded by your family, because good, bad, or otherwise, your family, you're working at it together. There's that unconditional love, and you can learn to care about someone else's interest.
I love that. Yes. I don't know that the 10-year-old appreciates all that about the NBA.
Well, she will. Oh, he will.
But my husband got us all tickets, so we got to have that shared experience. We all went to an NBA game, and whether or not we were into it, it was really fun. And so, we got to cheer and just have a really good time. So all those things culminate into memories, which, again, back to the gifts, these, one of the things I think I say is that memories happen in your everyday life, as opposed to like this 1 week in the Outer Banks. Like, that's what we made all of our good family memories. I mean, for us, they sort of happen, funny things happen, or, we're reading a book and we remember that funny little passage, or somebody made a meal and it wasn't that great. It's just a lot
Goes down in family lore. Those meatballs. We have Swedish meatballs. My poor mother made them for my father right after they got married, and like, he won't let her live it down. So we all know about like, don't eat her Swedish meatballs. I've never had them offered to me. So it must have been bad.
But yeah, it's all those shared moments, but they happen every single day, not like on some special weekend trip, but it happens just because, you are under that same roof and there are these funny things that happen.
Yes.
So
yes. It's in the mundane. That's where the memories are made.
It is.
Yeah.
It's so funny. People always like try to make it happen in a very unnatural way. And it's never in those moments. It's always on like I thought this was a 5-mile hike, but I think we're at the 10-mile mark. I did do that and everybody was super unhappy.
Yeah.
Not on purpose.
There's so many great memories where like a lot of people aren't happy and part of that memory. But that's how you build resilience. Like, you overcome together, you work together. We were on the river yesterday and a rainstorm came up, and it was just like, we were in the middle of a river and this is just not okay. But it was, we improvised, we went through something together collectively. It's going down in family lore, and you have more of those opportunities. Your kids get to see you at your best and at your worst. When you're losing your temper because you're on the side of the road with a flat tire, they're watching how this is navigated, where if they were in school, they wouldn't necessarily have those skills. They might learn about them in driver's ed, but it's like real life happening. How do we manage ourselves and keep everyone safe while we're on the side of the road?
And that did happen to me in the winter at 10 p.m. on the side of the road. And we had to wait almost 3 hours for a tow truck. So we ended up watching terrible YouTube videos. And yes, we do have that memory. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a real bad time suck, but guess what? We're passing time.
You pass time and you guys are laughing about it later.
Sometimes you need more time to pass before you really laugh about it. Yes. So we've talked about some of the surprises that have been at home. Have you seen some surprises, good or bad? For me, I didn't know all those life skills would be accomplished fairly quickly. So 2 of my kids know how to run, unload, do the washing machine, take the lint out, fold and put away their clothes. That's not something that I had any expectation of my children doing before like 17. Now I'm like, hi, you're home. Like let's do this. And so, I mean, for me, life skills have been a huge one. So can you talk about some of that sort of? Yeah.
The surprises of homeschool. Like, that's such a good illustration of just like, part of building a family culture is doing life together. And I do hear this and I understand the logic, and what works for one family is different for another family. So if you have your children in the public school system, I can understand why you're doing the laundry because their schedules are so jam-packed, especially if they have extracurricular activities. But when you're at home, you're able to delegate and teach. So like, I'm like, hey, we're a part of a team. We all live here. We all make the mess. And so, and our household, everybody has something to do with the laundry. So it's mainly my oldest daughter's responsibility, but I've told her, I'm like, you want to help me help them learn, because that will work yourself out of a job. And then the 8-year-old's she's coming up on it. She's almost there because she likes learning together. She likes doing it with her sister, and she really likes stain treatment, which makes us all happy. So they do the laundry, they cook their own meals. They're at a place where every once in a while they'll cook a meal for the family. And so this is helping work me out of my household jobs, because I can outsource and I can delegate, and I'm giving them the responsibility that's growing their muscles. And so absolutely practical life skills. Another surprise of homeschooling for me is just the opportunities for mentorship. And so because I'm in charge of my time and my children's time, and I want them to be in charge of their time, we have a wonderful mentorship for my 14-year-old. So this is her second year, and she's working, one of her interests is also in gardening and regenerative agriculture. And so we have a family friend that owns a veggie wagon, and they grow their own vegetables. They outsource what they can't fill in. And so my daughter goes out there 2 days a week and is mentoring and interning with this farm and picking up all kinds of skills. People that I just meet for the first time, they're like, oh, you're my daughter's name. I didn't, it's nice to meet you. And I'm like, how do you know her? I just met you. And they're like, oh, well, we met her out at the wagon. And so there's these extra opportunities that you can make happen that help in your child's education in maybe a alternative way, but how rich is that type of learning?
Agreed. I totally agree. One thing that we're incorporating into our homeschool more deliberately, I mean, we did it sort of intermittently, but is service. So, I'm like, hey, how can we serve our community that we live in? Because you guys are here and there's time to do it. And so we've been exploring some of those opportunities. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to have a quarterly talent show kind of thing. Whoever other homeschoolers want to come. We live near some senior communities, and they were like, yes, come in, perform. We don't care what it is. And so we're super looking forward to connecting that way. And then I taught my kids how to play all the silly card games that I did, growing up. And so they love it. And they're like, oh, I don't want to play mommy. They're like, mommy, you have to play with your non-dominant hand and the other hand behind, we're
handicapping you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so fun, I guess, just having, I appreciate it more. I feel like just because I know what it's like on the other side where, I didn't have them do any chores because they really weren't home. They weren't home from 7:17 until 3. And then at 3, it was just like you said, they would have a snack, homework, after school activity, wash, go to bed. So I don't know where in there they're going to do any chores, but there was no time.
Yeah. And that can happen also to us in our homeschools. We can, because I think sometimes we think, well, we're home all day. Yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do this. And the next thing we know, we're running ourselves and our family ragged. So that's something to keep in mind too. You want to say no to good things so that you can say yes to the best. And that takes that intentionality that we talked about earlier about why am I doing this? What is my main goal here? And all of these wonderful opportunities keep presenting themselves. And I have all of these extra, it's not just for me, it's not just for my 14-year-old. I have an 8-year-old, I have a 3-year-old. We're a foster family. So, if we have a foster child, we might have someone else to consider. And so it's always about that time management aspect. And we all do it. Here I am, I'm a time management person, and then I'll get myself into being overscheduled, but it's knowing how to pull back out to recognize the signs. How do I unschedule myself? How do I kind of work this smarter next time? That's also kind of things that we pick up as we homeschool. So if that's you, you can get yourself out of it. We can answer those questions maybe.
Yes. So I worked myself into that corner of the yes to all the good things. So at the end of the year, I was really cranky. My husband was really cranky, and my daughter was really cranky. And I looked back and I said, why are we so cranky? It was because she was in Girl Scouts. She was in ballet. She was in piano. She was in violin. She was in tennis, and she was in, gymnastics. That was one kid. I'm not even going through the other activities of the other ones. So when I would tell my husband, oh, hey, I want to have a museum day. He's like, no, I just already drove all over everywhere. We're not going to do, the best thing. And so this year I'm really, really good. And I'm we like ballet and we like our ballet friends, but we are not doing that. Not because ballet is not good, because ballet is great, because we are going to be really, really good about, how we're using that time, our family time. Because like you said, it doesn't matter whether you're a homeschooler or other schooler, your time is your time. And if you decide to give all these pieces away, then all of a sudden you're, running around and you're no longer having fun.
Yeah. And then you're all going back to school. And so, sometimes we all get ourselves there. Yeah. Oh, I have totally been there. I'm like, that yellow bus is looking really good. And so let's normalize that. You and I are totally normalizing it. That happens to all of us. We have the best intentions in the world. And then we get in seasons of overwhelm. And so it's about learning from those seasons and getting to the root of what happened so we can understand it. And then we can do better in the future. And so it's about not just having the time, we have all this time, we're homeschoolers. No, it's about making the time and being really strategic with it, so that we're having that extra time that is so fruitful and available to us to build those relationships with our family members, rather than everybody living their best life independently and we're all doing this.
Yes. And I mean, I totally learned that the hard way, and I will not be doing that again. Or at least I said I wasn't. But somebody just had asked me oh, hey, do you want to be in nope, we already signed up to do one field trip a month, and that is what we're going to do. I'm sure your field trips will be great, and maybe next year.
And that's important to teach to our kids, because they're usually with us when we're no. And then why not? Why can't I do this? And it's well, this is why. And because my children have lived through those seasons where we were overscheduled, they can accept oh, yes, I remember that. Okay, makes sense. And so that's learning too.
Agreed. Okay. Do you have any good resources for kids who should be receiving therapies, but due to finances, private therapy is not an option and it's not available through the public school system? Okay.
No. I love these questions because this is where the meat is. So as I understand it, and whoever asked this question, they can clarify. It sounds to me like you need services for your children. They've probably got some kind of diagnosis or some kind of label that in the public school system, you would work an IEP or a 504 for. And so now it's okay, well, I'm homeschooling, but now I'm the services. And I don't know where you live, but you are still eligible for those services. So if you're looking for those, let's say it's speech therapy, they're still able to do that. So you would still work with your local school board at trying to get those services. Those are available. And then it's just you have to advocate for your child, because the school system itself isn't not wanting to give you those services. They're just not as familiar as they are with working within the school administration. The other thing would be is to do some homework, because there's a lot of resources out there about how we can come and support neurodivergence. Neurodivergence isn't some sort of less than, it is a difference. And so you have a different learner, and a lot of times just bringing that different learner home into their home environment, that resolves a lot of the complications that show up when you send your neurodivergent child to school. Somehow you didn't even know they were neurodivergent a lot of times until they enter the school system. And then you're in the parent-teacher conference and they're telling you your kid has ADHD, or they think you need to pursue an autism diagnosis. And you're well, what? So we kind of think about that. And a lot of that is because when you're a neurodivergent child, you've got trouble with transitions. There's a lot going on. But by bringing them back in the home environment, you're able to provide a level of support that the best specialists in the world, the hour or so that they've got to meet with them, or longer, depending on what it is, because I know that different levels of service are available. But you're able to provide that as the parent. I'm not sure if that's helpful, but you can reach out to me on a private DM if you want actual specifics. I can send you websites, podcasts to listen to, books to listen to. We can list a few of them. I don't know how you want to take this, but that would be how I would kind of hit that right off the top.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And I think we also, with our director of research, he did a huge project on exactly what you said, which was once you bring that kid home, it kind of makes a lot of those things go away, because a lot of things that they were dealing with happen at their own pace, be that transitions or learning at their own pace, or not having to, deal with, the stigma of not having learned that next step. And then, always having the special ed person coming in, and they're kind of, pegged as the one that is not smart. Everybody knows that special ed person, all those things. And so what happens is, whether or not the parents have specialized, they don't have any training or anything in those, it doesn't matter. It's their kid, and their kid is home with their
You are
parents.
the specialist. You understand your child in a way that no one else ever will. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, for me, a long time, it's like this thing where I'm like, well, I've gone to school and I've gone to grad school, but I'm not a trained teacher. And, my husband's like, well, I'm not a trained teacher, but I failed to take that one more step. And it's like, no, we actually are. We taught them how to do a whole bunch of things before we sent them to school. And it's like, we are their first teachers. And frankly, I think because we love them so much, like, we would want what's best for them. So if we're not it, then we're going to try to find what that is. And I think that that's like step number 2, because that's what my friends who don't homeschool say. They're like, I'm not a teacher. I wasn't trained in that. I can't do that. But it's like, you're your child's parent. So that means that you can.
Yeah. And actually, so many teachers that are like trained educators that decide to homeschool, there's a lot of them out there. They go through a process, and I had to go through this process too. It's deschooling. Like, you have to kind of unwind this idea of like one teacher and 30 children. When you're in home, it's not a top down. It's like we've already talked about, it's this communal learning. I'm learning with you. I just have more resources and I have more experience to support this learning. And we're doing it together, and we're learning together. Like, I've learned so much more as a homeschool mom than I learned the first time around. Through like K through 12.
Yes. I mean, if I wasn't humble before, I'm certainly humbled now, because I can say, like, my son's like, do you know how a shell grows? Well, no, I don't. I have no idea. I went to a
learn together.
They didn't teach me that one, for sure. Okay.
Yeah, and education is just learning how to learn. We want our kids to learn how to learn. They don't need to be full of facts. They just need to know how to get the information and to think critically. That's what we really want.
Exactly. And, I think that deschooling part is a really important one to mention, because, I'll tell my daughter, and she's always like, I don't like homeschool. I don't like homeschool. And I'm like, I need you to tell me what it is that you don't like about homeschool. And, she wants this, like, at 6 o'clock we do this, and at 7 o'clock we do that. And there's a break. And you know what I mean? She has this sort of like institutionalized mentality. And I was like, if you want to write a book about, the gummy bear trip, she started this really, really crazy book. And I was like, did you read that somewhere? Because it's really sort of way out there. And she's like, no, it's just my idea. And I was like, well, then write your book and we can publish your book. And she's like, you know what I mean? It just blows her mind, because she's like, I'm like, and you can decide every day I can work an hour on this book, and then I will have it really published, bound. You can sell it, book signing. And I think for her, it's like such a leap, because it's always been this certain way, and you have to do it a certain way. And, homeschooling is, there is no certain way.
Yeah. And that's really preparation for life right there. It's beautiful.
It is. And, I have taken a couple days off last year where I'm like, you know what? Guess what? We don't have school today. And the kids, like, they kind of freeze, because they're like, I don't understand. Like, why are we off? Is today off day? And I'm like, no, I have deemed it to be off for us. And now we're going to go get ice cream. And they're like, but why? You know what I mean? It's
why
just,
not?
Yeah. Get in the car before I change my mind.
Yeah.
Okay. We have another question. We feel bad because we don't have many friends and the co-ops are all church-based. How do we make it easier? Kids are 6 and 7.
Okay. So I get this question all the time. So it sounds like, so she's got 6 and 7. Is that correct? That's the age of her children.
Yes.
So obviously, like, faith-based communities are stemming from their church. I attend church, but my homeschool group has nothing to do with church. And so this was a friend of mine who is not a faith-based homeschooler. She's a secular homeschooler. And she was really looking for the type of community I was also looking for, which is, I want play-based, I want nature, I want community with other homeschooling moms. And I want it to be diverse. I want to have lots of opinions, because we don't have freedom unless we have dissent. So if we're all an echo chamber of things, then are we really learning, or are we just amen, girl? So I didn't want that. She didn't want that. And so we each there's lots of ways you can do this. I'll just list a couple. You need to build your own. If you want it, you might need to build it. So what you can do is you can just have one other person, and then the two of you meet, and you guys invite anyone else you know, and then you kind of invite from there. You can go put up an ad and let your librarians in your local area know you're interested in meeting with other homeschoolers, especially if you're a new homeschooler. The librarians know the homeschoolers. Use Facebook. Start a Facebook group.
It's so true.
It's so true. Yeah, I know all my librarians by name. We're like friends, and they're like, "Have you read?" And I'm like, "No." And then she's like, "I think you might, because you're doing Roman history." She's like, "Have you heard about this series?" I was like, "No, this is amazing. This is exactly what I didn't know I needed." So go to your libraries. Think about where homeschoolers hang out. Go to Facebook. Look up a Facebook group. Wild and Free is an excellent organization. They have lots of in-person communities that meet and just go out in nature together. So there's a lot of ways to build community. And if you're homeschooling, you need that community because there's so many naysayers and they hit you with the same questions over and over again. You're constantly defending yourself, that you need that in-person community, those strong relationships of like-minded in the sense of homeschooling, but you might have some unschoolers in your group. You might have people who are really like classical homeschoolers, and those are kind of diametrically opposed. And you all coexist because you're all doing this countercultural thing together. So community is definitely a huge thing, and that's how I kind of attack it.
I agree with you 100%. And I can also say at HSLDA, we have a director of groups. His name is Darren Jones. And if you go on our website, I will try to list it here in the comments. If you go to groups, you can get yourself plugged in that way. As a new homeschooler, I was trying to find, that perfect group, and I wasn't able to find it. Like, one was too far away, one met on the wrong day. And so, just like Kelly said, I made my own group. I found a friend. We were both pandemic schoolers. Like, we both had similarly aged children, not exactly perfect, which, is really hard for people who are not, coming from, like, we want everyone to match up exactly year to year. And
that's a school mentality.
I'm really getting over that, because somebody said to me, "How natural is it that you have 30 kids exactly the same age in one room at all times?" And I'm like, "Oh, that is really weird." But like, unless you take it out of the context that people think that is normal, it's not normal.
Yeah, it's not normal. And kids, and we build friendships after we leave school. We build friendships based on interests or geography. Like, I'm friends with my neighbors. I'm friends with people I share interests with. And one of the things you'll notice if you start a play-based community group is like, there's always the builders, and the builders are like 14, 13. Like, my 8-year-old is a builder. So if there's water, she's damming it every single time. And the other builders get together and they teach each other what they know, and they work on their own little science experiments. And then you have the climbers, and the climbers are all one-upping each other over here. And then you've got the like organized game people that are like, let's play. And so it's a variety of ages, and that's the richness that homeschooling gives. And then there's the mentorship. There's the natural mentorship that's wrapped up in just play. So there's a lot there.
Agreed. And I mean, it really is so important to get outside. Good day, bad day, hot day, cold day. I know that I feel better when I go outside. And when things are going awry, I'm like, just go outside. And I'm not sure, whatever you guys want to do, take a dog, don't take a dog, go for a walk, see how you feel when you get back.
Yes. So. I just wanted to say one more thing about the community. I host rooms on Clubhouse. It's a free app every week. And that's, if you can't find, or you need like something now until you can build your in-person community, it's just a longer form. It's like this, but it's audio only. And homeschoolers come up with questions, and it's a large group participating. So go to my, I guess my credentials will be in the comments for this, but like, I'll plug you into there, because that would just be something on a weekly basis. You can tune in and ask your questions to a group of homeschoolers. It's also another alternative to the ones we've already given. That's really good.
That is awesome. But I'm sure you'll echo this with me. Do not be an island, because you'll be very sad. Don't be an island. Homeschool is not meant to be alone, not supposed to be lonely. Don't be lonely. Find your people, find your person that you can walk with, find a mentor. Every time I feel like I'm doing something wrong, I call this woman whose kids went to college, and they all don't live in her house now, and they've all moved on in life. And so I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing with this. She's like, yeah, I wasn't really into that. So I just have them read a couple books and they'll be fine. So, like, you need a they'll be fine person. And then maybe you find like an identified cheerleader where you're down in the dumps, and you can call that person. They can be like, hey, you got this. You need all these different people That person could be one person, that person could be multiple people, that could be a community group. Like I have I'm not able to get to it all the time, but they meet once a month. So it's like homeschooling moms. And so you get to go together, you get to commiserate, you get to share resources. And really that's sort of the gas that keeps the homeschooling, go. Because you can't, what is that thing? You can't pour out of an empty vessel, right? And so I think, I did like the empty vessel a couple of months where I was like, I am unhappy, which is not.
I was there. Right there with you. I was like, help me. I don't even know who I am anymore.
Yes. And so I find, I'm happy. The kids are happy. We're all, happy is the wrong word, but we're all content and we're living in a nice environment that we want to be in together. And so, it really stems from whoever is administering, say, most of the homeschooling. And for my husband and I, he's like, I feel like all we do is do homeschooling and talk about homeschooling. He's like, I don't want to do that anymore. So it took me to be like, okay, we're on a date. I'm not going to talk about which math we're going to do. Should we do teaching textbooks or should we do math? Like he does not want to hear about it. We are on a date. We're going to talk about not homeschool. I'm like, oh, got it. We are not going to talk about homeschool. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to not talk about this, but I really want to talk about it because
I need to talk about it with someone. You can call me.
You call you, Kelly. I'm totally going to call you. Oh my goodness. I have no idea. I was like, how are we going to fill up an hour? Well, apparently that's not a problem for us. Thank you so much for joining me, Kelly. I think hopefully people got some good ideas and tips and just feel encouraged from our conversation this afternoon.
Yes. I've had so much fun. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to doing this again sometime, whether it's in person or online.
We should do it in February. We'll come up with jokes and, where some of
everything up.
Because February, about 10th or so, I need a pick me up. I'm not, chocolate.
You last longer than me. I'm normally by January 15th. I'm like, okay, we're done.
I have heard of people taking all of February off, which I'm like, that is intense.
And you can do that. And that's one thing, if it's not working for you, just stop, take a break. Like you said, you have your ice cream day or take a season because you can school year round and it looks different. You could do formal schooling until you're done and then you can switch to something else that's just a different pacing and pick it back up after you've had a good break.
Totally. And I'm going to take our own advice and administer it to myself.
Right.
So for those of you watching, audiences thinking about homeschooling or has decided to homeschool, you're looking for next steps and resources, you can find us at hslda.org. We'll post a link in the comments. It's hslda.org. Get started. In addition to our website resources, I want to let you know HSLDA members have access to a great legal team, educational consultants that'll help you set up your homeschool, tailor your homeschool, hold your hand, cry with you, all the good things. You might have a child with learning differences who have dealt with bullying, trauma in a traditional school or other settings. HSLDA educational consultants are also homeschool moms who specialize in pre-K through 8th grade and high school. They're ready to help you tackle all those challenges, whether it's finding a math curriculum or, fun things to do. And we also have a huge library of resources. We've done some webinars. We have another one coming up actually on Thursday at 7 p.m. They are free. And I'm going to go ahead and share Kelly's website. It's 90minuteschoolday.com. She's also on Instagram, 90minute school day. And I also have one. It's called the Reluctant Homeschool Mama. But I feel like I should change it because I was reluctant before, and now I'm kind of like the excited, but with some trepidation homeschool mom. I need to come up with a shorter one.
Shorter one.
Yeah, a little bit shorter. Anyways, thanks again, Kelly. And I look forward to meeting again, here in person on the river, preferably when it's not raining.
When it's not raining, yes, I agree.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Today's program is made possible by Mom Possible. Step into this engaging, interactive space for practical support from moms who are right there with you in the day-to-day of homeschooling. You can browse our library of tips and resources, see how other parents are answering common questions about homeschooling, or join our mentoring group for deeper community support. Get started at mompossible.org. That's mompossible.org. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you've enjoyed this conversation, will you do us a favor by sharing it with a friend or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts? As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hsldA.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, you can sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. That's all for now. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll see you next time.